The Mariners have made a couple of expected moves official today. We'll talk about those and then look at the AL West for potential trade targets coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, November 1st, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today, we have some expected Mariners news to quickly go over. Then we'll be wrapping up our divisional trade preview series with a look at the rosters of the Mariners division rivals. But before we do that, shout out to our title sponsor today, FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. Sign up now to hear us create our 2025 Mariners offseason plan, which we officially wrapped up on Wednesday. So if you want to hear that before we officially unveil it on this show, I believe next week we're going to be doing that. You can check that out. We also have a spreadsheet on there that lays everything out, breaks it all down, shows you how it all works. So yeah, check it out if you want. All right, so we have a couple of roster moves from the Mariners this morning, both of which very much expected. Luis Urias has been waived and has elected free agency. He was projected to make $5 million in arbitration. The Mariners obviously weren't going to pay that or anything close to that after the year that Urias had. So that's expected. Urias now a free agent. And then Jorge Polanco, his club option has been declined. The Mariners will pay a $750,000 buyout because of that, but they end up saving $12 million, right? So yeah, that's about it. Obviously, that move expected because especially after the news of Polanco's patella tendon surgery came out about a few weeks ago. Before that, it was a little bit more up in the air after obviously a very disappointing year, injury plagued season for Polanco, but 31 years old, undergoing patella tendon surgery, obviously has track record of injuries as well. That spans beyond that. Writing was pretty much on the wall that the Mariners were going to move on, especially at that dollar figure. So yeah, Colby, before we move on, any thoughts on today's moves?
I mean, nothing at all unexpected. Urias, maybe he comes back later in the winter as a minor league free agent. I guess it depends on how much he enjoyed his time in Seattle and Tacoma and whether or not he can get a major league deal somewhere else. But yeah, it's not a impossibility that he comes back. So yeah, there's no real surprises here. Polanco, again, that the writing was on the wall. And then once we learn about the surgery and how it's probably going to wipe out his entire winter of prep and all that stuff, and he may or may not be ready by opening day, it's very vague, and he probably won't be ready. And even if he is, it'll be on a really shortened, prep schedule. So at that point, no, he's not worth anywhere close to $12 million. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all. It's to be expected. There's a few other moves left that we're expecting, but the Mariners right now, their 40-man roster is at 36. That's not counting the three guys on the 60 still, who will need to be activated in the next few days, but that'll still keep them at 39. So they're under the 40-man mark as Garcia falls off the 40-man. Justin Turner's fallen off the 40-man. So yeah, it's no surprise there. The 40-man is in good shape, and if you're worried about, what are the Mariners going to do with it? Don't worry. Like, Austin Kitchens is still here. Like, we're good. So
yeah, we've gone over that.
Yeah, there's no 40-man crunch yet.
There are a lot of levers they can pull in that regard. Mm-hmm. So,
one name I'm watching over the next few days, Jackson Kowar. The Mariners acquired him in the Kelnick deal. They were very high on him in spring, and he did some really interesting things in like the first 2 weeks of spring training that raised a lot of eyebrows, and unfortunately Tommy John. And so do they want to carry him all winter? Do they want to, offer? I think he might be ARB eligible. I mean, he would only make the minimum.
He's not.
Okay. But he was only going to make the minimum either way. So do they want to carry him all winter? they probably should. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see what they do. But the Mariners 40 man is in really good shape in terms of, well, the Mariners have plenty of options to move guys off the 40 man. I don't want to say it's in great shape because of that, but you guys know what I mean. So it's just some roster cleaning today.
Yeah, and with Polanco, I mean, that timeline that's clearly set by his camp, it's supposed to be optimistic, right? Because otherwise you're talking about a 31-year-old having the surgery that he just did. And no matter what the severity of the injury is, patella tendon injuries of any kind are pretty serious things.
Yeah.
He would be dead on arrival entering free agency if teams already knew, like, he's not going to be ready to go by spring training, right? But even if he is, again, because it's going to undeniably take a significant chunk out of his offseason prep, what shape is he going to be in come spring training? Where is he going to be at really in terms of his build up for the season, right? There's just so many questions with that this was absolutely the right decision to make. And I think there was a pretty strong argument that even if there wasn't this surgery, that obviously changes the picture even more so, that given the year that he just had, that this was still the right move to move on. So it's a bummer because obviously we had pretty high expectations for Polanco, and you saw that, hey, you have $12 million club option. At the time of the trade, it was like, all right, that seems like that might actually work out. You might have a second base solution for not just 2024 but also 2025. But we all know how that went, unfortunately. So all right, we are going to get into our divisional trade preview series covering the AL West. We only have 4 teams to cover instead of 5 like we've done on every other one of these episodes, because of course this is the Mariners division. We'll be going over those teams in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So we've talked about the 2 Mariners roster moves made today. Now let's get into our divisional trade preview, which is the last in this series. We've saved the Mariners division for last, the AL West. So we only have 4 teams to talk about today instead of 5. And as always, we're working in reverse order of the standings, which first brings us, funny enough, to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, who lost, what was it, Colby? 99 games this year?
99 problems, but the Mariners weren't one, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Yes. One of the many unfortunate things about the Mariners struggling against the Angels is that they had the opportunity to deliver them their 100th loss, which I believe would have been the first time in their franchise's history that they'd lost 100 games.
Oh.
So, yeah, it just...
Yeah, it stings.
What a waste. What a waste.
This is obviously a team that Jerry DiPoto has never traded with in his time as Mariners GM / president of baseball operations.
Don't necessarily think it's from a lack of effort on his part. Kind of feels like it's the other way, but
might have to do with his time as general manager of the Angels. But who knows? But yeah, this is one of 2 teams.
When he was the only guy to get them to the playoffs in the last 15 years. Yeah, what a jerk! How dare he?
Yeah.
The only guy to get Mike Trout in the playoffs. How dare he?
Can we start calling this drought that the Angels are in the DiPoto curse?
Sure. Why not?
Are we at that point now?
Sure. It's been like 10 years.
Yeah. So obviously this is one of 2 teams that Jerry's never traded with as Mariners GM / president of baseball operations, the Rockies being the other. So it honestly kind of feels like a waste of time to talk about anyone on this roster, but nevertheless, for content purposes if they did swing a trade somehow, some way, who would you like to see the Mariners target?
First things first, guys, little trivia question for you. Let us know in the comments, what is the last trade the Mariners and the Angels actually made with each other? There have not been a lot in the history of these two clubs. So let us know if you know, put it down in the comment section. But the Angels have been active already. They're too stubborn to actually rebuild. Not that they have a ton to honestly trade, like to kickstart a rebuild, but if they do finally, open up and not completely cut themselves off from, 1/29th of the other teams that they could trade with, especially one that has a pretty good farm system, one of like the 5 or 6 best farm systems in baseball. If they, they're not that stubborn. There are a few guys on the roster that do make some sense. I've been a fan of Taylor Ward for the last few years. There's a lot of Mitch Haniger vibes in how he plays. Not a very good year this year. He was hovering right around the league average mark, but league average bad as your 4th outfielder. Do a lot worse. Doubles.
I mean, he finished as a 111 WRC plus.
Oh, okay, so he finished strong. I remember he was hovering around 100. Around
246, 323, 426, 25 bombs, 75 ribs. He was almost a 3-win player this year.
It's very Mitch Haniger-y. So, I like Taylor Ward. I think he's got 2 years left of club control, if I'm remembering correct. Or is he ARB1? I feel like he's ARB2, but
he is 2 years of club control left. So
right,
ARB2.
So because he might be a little too expensive for the Mariners just because they have their 3 outfielders. But again, if you're talking Victor Robles insurance, if you're talking about a guy who pushes a Rosarena to DH some more than he had to last year, Taylor Ward could be a guy there to keep an eye on. Luis Urias is another guy. He can play second, he can play third, so he kind of helps you in both of those spots. Much better against left-handed pitching than he is right-handed pitching. So, that's not ideal, but overall the numbers are pretty good. He makes a lot of contact. He's going to hit for a pretty good average. Got some pop. You guys know Rengifo. He's a good player. He's a good, solid player. He can help you. So he'd be interesting. I believe he is a 1-year solution, if I'm not mistaken. Rengifo, for some reason, I always feel like is on the last year of his contract, but then I look and he's always got like 3 years of club control left. Okay, so finally he is in ARB 3. Feels like I thought he was in ARB 3 for the last 4 or 5 years. So Rengifo is pretty interesting. There's a few guys in the rotation that actually I think could be saved from the Angels. You guys know what I mean. Yeah. Patrick Sandoval is one of them. Reed Detmers is another. I think there's more there in both of those guys than the Angels have gotten out of them. So
now Sandoval had UCL surgery. It's not considered Tommy John, but it's UCL surgery.
Right. So you're kind of sitting on him in 2025.
I assume that's the brace. Surgery. Yeah.
Like I said, you're probably sitting on that in 2025, but when you come back in 2026, when Luis Castillo's no trade clause expires, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. There are a few guys here. There's bullpen pieces. There's always bullpen pieces. But obviously, Robert Stevenson, who we were very high on last year, he had the surgery. Don't know when he's coming back, probably middle of the year, but $10 million on a guy who might pitch half a year, if you're lucky, doesn't really seem very Mariner-y. Yeah. Hunter Strickland's a free agent. Estevez was traded already. So not a ton here, but again, Ward.
You're not getting Ben Joyce.
No. But again, Ward, Rengifo could make some sense. And then obviously, Sandoval, possibly. He might get non-tendered. Who knows? Sandoval and Detmers also make some sense. So there's a few guys here. You're not getting Neto. You're not getting Ohapi. You're obviously you don't want anything to do with Rendon or anybody like that. So just a handful of guys, a couple of guys who are pretty much everyday players, Rengifo and Ward, and then a couple of really interesting arms who are kind of number 5s right now. Sandoval's a little bit better than that, but he's hurt. There's some upside plays here on the Angels, and it is a team that could offer some solutions to the Mariners' problems.
Yeah. So the Oakland Athletics, obviously there's a big name here that we've talked about quite a bit.
Miguel Andujar.
Is he even still on the team? Oh, I guess he is. I see him. I see him here on roster resource. Yeah. But no, Brent Rooker, obviously, favorite of ours. I just don't know how you're going to get him, right? And like he's coming off of an insane year, and then the year prior he was really good as well. He wasn't as good as he was this year, but still really good. But before that, not really much to speak of. And now he's 30 years old. Like, is there some performance risk there? Maybe.
Sure.
And again, he's a DH who's probably not going to play in the field.
There's some roster limitations.
And if that's going to cost you Colt Emerson plus potentially, then I'm probably out.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade Colt Emerson for Rooker. I would trade pretty much any other prospect as the headliner. I think I'd probably trade Laz, Young, whatever, pick your guy, right? I'd probably trade any of them except for Emerson. And then obviously I'm not trading Wu or Miller. But let's be clear about this. The Oakland A's absolutely should trade Brent Rooker, or sorry, the A's now. They absolutely should trade Brent Rooker. He's got 3 years of club control left. He's still cheap. He's coming off of a career year, which came after a career year in which he was an all-star. So 2 really good seasons back-to-back, including a great one this year. He's 30 years old. He's never going to, by the time you get to Vegas, he's going to be a free agent. He's going to leave. You're not signing him to a long-term deal. This is the winter. This is when you trade Brent Rooker. You absolutely should trade him this winter. Will they? I don't know. Do they really care about drawing the 11,000 capacity crowd that the Sacramento minor league ballpark has? Like, I don't know. Like, are they even going to get that many anyways? Who knows? But they should absolutely trade Brent Rooker this winter. Are they going to? I kind of doubt it. Are they going to the Mariners? I especially doubt it, but they absolutely should. It's a no-brainer. They should trade Brent Rooker this winter. Like, he should not get to camp with you. But I suspect there's a pretty decent chance he will. But Rooker is a guy who not only is way up on my list of guys, but is also like way up on my like probably not going to happen like type of list, where it's like, yeah, I'd love the guy, but
he's in the Vlad Jr. range where it's like, we know the Mariners are interested and they're probably going to call, but I just don't see how they're going to get them.
Right. It's like, is it even worth really discussing that much this winter? Because the odds of it happening are so low. But yes, Rooker is definitely like a guy. And in terms of like guys who should be available this winter, I should say, he's like in my top 3. I would love to have Brent Rooker. I just don't see how you get it done. Aside from Rooker, there are, a handful of guys. There's
a couple of flyers.
Sure. I mean, like, you're not like Lawrence Butler had an insane year. They're not trading him. He'll actually be there, like when they actually get to Vegas and they can kind of build around him. But yeah, I mean, like, Rooker is obviously the main prize here. But like JP Sears, if you're looking for some rotation, I like JP Sears quite a bit. I can tell you like a deep sleeper. If you're worried about injuries, might not be the guy for you, but Esteury Ruiz as the 26th guy on the bench, fourth outfield type. Basically just there to steal bases, doesn't really do anything else that well. He's basically a glorified Terrence Gore, but he's fast and the Mariners like speed. So there are a few pieces in Oakland.
67 bags in 2023.
Interestingly enough, I believe he's coming off of a patella tendon surgery that he had earlier this year. So,
is he?
Yeah. So, but he's only 25, 26, I believe. So not quite the same as a 31-year-old who was already a bad athlete. Having that injury, so we'll see how that goes. But that's just a name to watch. But yeah, it's mostly Rooker in this one, and then I'll just bring him up because it's tradition. I mean, to talk about Oakland A's trade candidates and not bring up this guy, it'd be like Christmas morning without presents. It's Seth Brown. Sure, bring him up. Why not? Doesn't really fit all that well, but yeah, Seth Brown. I had to fulfill my quota.
If you like him more than Dom Canzone, then sure. As like the
$3.5 million more than Dom Canzone.
As like the left-handed hitting 4th, 5th outfielder, right? Depending on what you do with Luke Raley, of course. Yeah. All right. So we'll be going over the Rangers and the Astros here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Game Time. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Game Time. And that was the case well before Game Time sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Game Time's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We are wrapping up our divisional trade preview series with a look at the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. We'll start with the Rangers here because they finished behind the Astros in the standings and behind the Mariners as well. This is a weird team. Obviously coming off of a World Series championship in 2023. And then this year, very disappointing year. They are set to enter the offseason fifth in payroll. And they're one of the Bally Sports teams. So are they going to be willing to add payroll? Are they going to look to shed payroll? Are they just going to basically stand pat? What are the Rangers going to do? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now, personally.
We've already had reports that they plan to cut payroll.
Yeah.
So how much of it, how aggressive are they going to be to do that? I don't know. Those are the questions, but we do have reports already that they're expected to cut some of their payroll this winter. So, the easiest way to do that would be finding somebody to take Jacob deGrom's contract off your hands, but not going to happen. So yeah, there are quite a few guys making money on this roster. So they do have options and levers to pull. It's just kind of about where do they think that they can repurpose some of the money that they save to keep the roster? Because I don't think that they're going to look at this and be like, yeah, it's time for us to take a step back and kind of reload or like reconfigure and maybe it'll take a year or two. Like I don't see them necessarily, like I'd be pretty surprised if they traded, for example, Adolis Garcia, who, is making a good amount of money, is in his 30s, but I think 29 now. But
no, he's almost 32.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah.
Wow, you learned something new. So yeah, Adolis Garcia, I think because they want to still be competitive, I think they look at it and say, hey, if we can get rid of like Josh Gray or John Gray, sorry.
John Gray.
If they get rid of John Gray and his $13 million, like maybe then we could just replace that pitcher within and blah, blah. I think they're going to try and cut salary and still compete. And as we know, Major League Baseball, that's a very difficult thing to do. You have to be very careful with what you like, who you spend money on, who you trade away, because you may or may not have the options. Now, the Rangers do have Wyatt Langford. They do have Evan Carter, who they're expecting big things from. So maybe they do trade somebody like Adolis Garcia. That's certainly a possibility. But
that would be fascinating. One, I mean, he's best friends with Randy, so there's already like a fit there.
Sure.
And we know how fun Garcia can be when he's on.
Sure. He also doesn't walk like at all. He's coming off.
Oh, there's a lot of performance risk here.
Yeah, like you said, he's 32 years old. So
he also had a really bad year defensively this year.
Yeah, he's not a good defender. So yeah, he'd be an interesting guy. But again, I think if the Rangers trade him, it's kind of signaling to their fan base like, we're not really in it this year. And honestly, that should be fine. I mean, like, again, not to take anything away from the Rangers of 2023, a lot of things went right for them that year. A lot went right. And so it wasn't surprising to me at all that the Rangers had the season they did, because basically the Rangers this year is who I thought the Rangers last year were going to be. Jonah Heim took a big step back. You guys know the story by now. Yeah, so the Rangers are a fascinating team because they're going to try and cut payroll, but I also think they're still going to try and field a team that they believe could win the American League West. And it's like, can you do that? Because I think you're pretty far behind the Mariners and the Astros still. So we'll see. But one name that stands out a little bit here, Nathaniel Lowe. Mariners could use some first base help. Lowe is a guy. This is a low, right? Not a low.
He's a low.
Pretty good hitter, not an elite hitter. Kind of left-handed Ty France a little bit, but he is making $10.7 million this year. That's pretty pricey, especially when you have Luke Raley, who's making $10 million less than that.
Lowe gets on base though.
He does. He's a good hitter. Like he's a good, solid hitter, good player. Yeah. But again, 10.7. The Mariners want to spend that on first base only when they have Luke Raley, who's going to make the minimum. Like maybe they do, but maybe they don't. It's a possibility certainly to look at. I know there's an outfielder you want to talk about though, Ty, who's not Adolis Garcia.
Yeah, Leody Taveras is interesting. He's projected to make $4.3 million in arbitration, so there's a non-zero chance he gets non-tendered by the Rangers. There's also a pretty decent chance that the Mariners are not interested at that dollar figure for a guy that's essentially going to be their fourth or fifth outfielder, again, depending on what happens with Luke Raley and what his role is actually going to wind up being. But Taveras 2023 was a league average bat, 266, 312, 421, was a 2.5 win player. This year, 82 WRC plus. But he has pop. He can hit some home runs. We've seen that, unfortunately, against the Mariners. But the value here is the glove. It's a really good defender. Could play all three spots.
Yeah, I also feel like last year Taveras, a lot of his offensive output came in the first half, and then he was pretty bad in the second half. So that would be 18 months now where he's been a below average hitter. So, how much does that one, whatever WRC plus from 2023, how much does that really carry over? I don't know, but he's interesting. Certainly you kind of could use some speed and athleticism on your bench, some outfield defense on your bench. Wouldn't be the worst idea. So yeah, I mean, Texas is interesting, to say the least. They have some guys. One name, I don't think this is likely, but I'll just throw them out there just in case. Could they be talked into moving Marcus Semien? And could they be talked into eating some of his money to facilitate a trade? Because we know the Mariners were interested in Semien a couple of years ago. They simply weren't willing to, go 7 years on the 30-year-old, which, kind of makes sense. Semien wasn't very good this year offensively. So, does he have a bounce back year next year at 33, 34 years old? Do you want to? I mean, he's still set to make. I think he's got 5 years left on that deal. $125 million. The Mariners probably aren't interested at that price. Might they be interested at 5 and 80, 5 and 70? Maybe, probably not, but maybe. So, just keep an eye on Semien as well. There are some guys. One of the things I floated early on was this like John Gray for Mitch Garver contract swap. Gray has a lot of really fun tools as a pitcher that nobody's really ever been able to get the best out of him. Maybe the Mariners could, but do you want to trade your backup catcher for a 6 starter / middle relief guy? Probably. Like, do you want to pay a middle reliever $13 million? I mean, and plus if you're Texas, isn't the point to save money? So yeah, there are some guys here for the Rangers, but it's a really difficult club to kind of get your finger on the pulse of, because they do want to cut payroll, but they also still want to compete. So, if they're going to trade for prospects, they probably want prospects who are close to major league ready. It's a weird kind of team, but there are some guys here that could help the Mariners for sure.
The Mariners haven't been afraid to trade with the Astros in the past. This is another team Dana Brown, their GM, said they're going to have to get creative with payroll. Obviously, Alex Bregman.
They're cutting some.
Yeah, Alex Bregman is hitting free agency. Are they going to bring him back? If so,
doesn't sound like
is that all they can do? And if not, what are they going to do after that? I don't see a ton of options here for the Mariners. Like maybe Jake Myers, maybe Chas McCormick, maybe Mauricio Dubon.
Yeah. I mean, even if he was available, they're not trading Kyle Tucker to the Mariners. That's not happening. No. So if you're like, trade for Kyle Tucker guy, no, not going to happen. Not this year. they're not going to trade for Amber Valdez to the Mariners. Not that he makes much sense for Seattle anyways, right now, but those two guys are both free agents after this year. We know again that the Astros have already talked about payroll creativity. Is it so that they can afford Tucker? Is that the plan? They're going to extend Tucker? I don't know. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, the Astros are at a bit of a crossroads right now. It's almost like they shouldn't have given $100 million to Josh Hader. Who would have guessed?
Right.
That would be a bad idea. But there are some guys, but a lot of them, like the big names, they're not going to trade them to you. And then even kind of the secondary names or kind of like the contributors but not stars that they do have available. Like you're not getting Brian Abreu, Chas McCormick. How much does he really help? So yeah, they are an interesting team for sure. But kind of like the Rangers, they're cutting payroll. It's really tough to cut payroll and get better. And as we just saw this last year, the Astros, they're not the class of the American
They need
League
help.
anymore.
They need help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a severely flawed baseball team. And like I said, it took the Mariners literally collapsing for them to make the playoffs, which, I mean, good for them. They took advantage of. They played really good ball. Like it's not just that the Mariners collapsed. It's that the Astros played fantastic baseball from like June until September. So they're still a threat. Obviously, they're still very good at player development and all that stuff. But this is a roster that needs help. And if they're cutting payroll, they're probably going to lose Bregman. They might lose Tucker next year. They're kind of in this weird stage. So it's really tough to kind of pin down what they may or may not be willing to trade, particularly to you, a division rival, and the biggest threat to their run of dominance in the American League West.
So that is going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tidy Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tidy Gonzalez, Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.